Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Harika. So in this video, we are going to see how to build a stable selector, because when we are doing UI automation, selector is the one strongest thing that will drive us through, right? So in order to do that, first of all, I will first tell you the don'ts. What are the things that you should not include into your selector? Then later we will talk about the good practices that you can include and modify a bit to make the selector stable. So first, for the example, I have taken a particular selector here. So we all know, right? This is a full selector that we have here. So if you see here, I'm having this is a selector corresponding to my web element on the screen. So if you see, there are different attributes and attribute values, right? So in this attribute, this is called index. Okay, so this idx variable should never ever try to take the idx variable into your selector, because I'll tell you, this is basically comes into picture with reference. Okay, so if the reference element changes or anything in the web application changes a bit, this will be volatile. So we should never try to consider idx as a selector in order to make it a strong selector. Okay, so this is the first thing you have to avoid. And the next thing is, so as I already told you, css selector, right? So this css selector, if you just observe here, this is nothing but the branching, like how a particular element, like let's say if the script is there, how the script is connected. So let me take an element from here. So let's say I'm taking watch. Okay, so if you see here, the css selector for this is this one, right? So this is just like a branching, how we can reach to the object or a web element called img. Okay, so if you see in the left side panel, let me expand this a bit to check. So this is how the branching is done, like one element is linked to another element inside. So it's like a parent child, just like that, how this element is built. So it has to travel through all these tags, like body tag, gt tag, and all these tags in order to reach the tag called img. Okay, so let's say if something changes in between, like let's say I would take off one element from here. So let me validate. So this will be failing, right? So that's why we should try to avoid the css selector from our stable selectors. So these are the two main things, idx and the css selector. You should never try to get them into your selectors to make them working stable. Okay, and apart from that, we should try to check whatever the selectors that we are taking, those should not be dynamic. Let me show you how this works. So let's say if I'm taking parent id. Okay, let me validate. So this is pointing, right? So let me show I'm taking the parent id, this one. So before to that, let me point to a this one, which is rpa challenge. In this I can show you some of the volatile selectors. Okay, go here, indicate element. So here I'm taking the value. Okay, so if you see, I'm taking id as this and tag as input. Okay, so I'm validating and I'm highlighting this, so it's pointing correctly, right? So basically in any of the selectors, if you wanted to pick some attributes, id is the most strong thing that you can select. But also when the id is of something of this type, like you can see, right, this is kind of gibberish. So if it is of this type, you should try to check if this is changing all the time or if this is stable. So how can I do a check? So come here, refresh the page, and once after the page gets refreshed, we'll validate the element. Okay, I think my internet is slow. It's taking a bit longer than usual. Okay, it's getting done. So right, we know that in this page these things are changing all the time, right? We have seen in the previous video. So Where am I here? So let's do a validate. If you see, this is not highlighting, right? So let me indicate the element and take this, or let's take the email only. So if you see, this is different from what we've captured earlier, right? So this is gibberish. So we should try to avoid the values which are gibberish. But most of the cases, ID is the most strongest, or most stable attribute that we can consider. But when you can see something of this type, which is not a something which is not making any sense, so kind of gibberish, so you can try to check by refreshing the page if it's changing or not. If it's stable, then that's fine. And then so in this case, what you cannot take, so let's go back to Amazon site. Okay, here I can show you what are the selectors that we can consider. So let me go over here. Okay, so if you see here in this page, okay, so let's talk about different attributes now. So if you see, I'm having class name and the CSS, I'm not going to take inner text and a name and all these things, right? So if you see, why this is coming up this way. Okay, so if you just observe here, the parent ID is navigation link. This seems most promising, like it may not change. And the span tag it is. And then this class, whatever we are taking here, right? So maybe this class value, I am assuming this two values there, right? So that may change, may or may not. I'm not sure. So for that, I may refresh and I can check. But and also when I'm having a ampersand and special characters, which I have seen like this, I'll try to delete them um, like this. And also if you see the spaces of something of this sort, we have already seen how we can use the wildcards, right? So just replace this with an ampersand, so that even though if there are some extra spaces that are there in middle, so that will not really affect your selector. Okay, so try to avoid these extra spaces. And also let's assume if you're not sure that if this two will be varying or not all the time, so if you're having a question of that sort, you can replace this, or you can just neglect this particular variable. Okay, so and also try to keep as much as ANM as possible into your selectors, because mostly ANM would be of constant. So let's see here. So if I'm having ANM as fashion, so see here, there are no spaces, right? So if there are spaces, try to replace that with wildcards mostly. Okay, and so that's all. I think I have covered most of the things here in this video, how to make a stable selector. So try to avoid index CSS selectors and the things that are constantly varying. If a ID, if you're thinking that it's gonna vary, try to refresh the page and check. If it's varying, try to avoid it. And mostly try to take the text with respect to text is as a second consideration apart from ID. And you can take tags as well if you wanted to click them, because let's say in some cases, if a tag is anchor tag, that is mostly a clickable tag. Okay, so you can take it in this way. This is a basic video that can explain you what all things you should consider and you should avoid in order to make your variable uh, selectors strong. Okay, so I believe this is clear for you with respect to don'ts and do's, and as well as how to replace the spaces with wildcards, right? I hope it does make sense and have given a clear understanding on how to make a selector stable. So now with this much understanding, we'll go into the next video. We will try to see how we can work on these things and use the different activities in the UI automation. Thank you so much for watching.